The world cannot be understood without numbers. But the world cannot be understood with numbers alone. Most of us are not only ignorant about the world, but ignorant about our ignorance. Data allow your political judgments to be based on fact to the extent that numbers describe realities. It turns out that the world, for all its imperfections, is in a much better state than we might think. There's no room for facts when our minds are occupied by fear. You have to have statistics to challenge your preconceived ideas. Everyone says that globalization has been a disaster for the poor. But in the last 20 years, the proportion of people living in extreme poverty has halved. We should be teaching the basics of global health and the facts of poverty to all kids in school. People ask me, "Aren't you too optimistic?" My answer is, "What do you mean?" The world is improving at a rate that is faster than any time in human history. The media is always searching for things that go wrong. When you count the positive changes in the world, you get a completely different picture. The world is still divided into us and them, and we're still living with that outdated mentality. Double quotes. The world is not getting worse. In fact, most things are getting better. There's so much improvement happening in the world. But people are not aware of it because bad news sells. It's very hard to change opinions when your worldview is based on outdated information. We can make the world a better place, but first we need to get a true understanding of where we are. Double quotes. My interest is in the health of the poorest, and that's why I try to understand their reality. People would rather hear about conflicts and crises than stories about gradual improvements. Don't get carried away with percentages. Look at the actual numbers. You can't understand the world if you only look at what you see in the news. To think that the world is getting worse, that's wrong. But thinking it will get better by itself is also wrong. My greatest frustration is that there are so many people who are well-educated, well-informed, and yet completely wrong. You don't get that many facts in life. In life, you get stories. We have an instinct to notice the dramatic and sensational, which means we often miss the more gradual and positive changes. If you don't use statistics, then you'll be forced to tell anecdotal stories which can be very misleading. There's no room for misinterpreting reality. If we want to make good decisions about the future, learning to see the world through statistics is like putting on glasses and seeing clearly for the first time. People's general knowledge of the world has not kept up with the world's improvements. Most of the time, people are not only wrong about global trends, but also consistently wrong. The facts are not enough. We need to reshape our understanding of the world with fresh eyes. I fight ignorance with a tool that's always right in my hand: data. There are facts, and then there are interpretations of facts. Often, we confuse the two. Fear gives us a distorted picture of the world, often making things look worse than they are. Stereotyping whole groups or countries is not only wrong, it's also deeply unhelpful. The world is not divided between rich and poor countries. It is not a dichotomy. Double quotes. We need to shift our focus from stories of doom to stories of solutions. The big picture often gets lost when we are constantly zooming in on every small problem. The world is more complicated than good guys and bad guys. Reality is nuanced. Think about the world in terms of degrees, not divisions. When we have a fact-based worldview, we can see that things are both bad and better. We need to teach people to hold multiple perspectives at the same time. That's the best way to understand complex issues. Most of us see the world as divided, but most of the world is in the middle. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. The media's instinct to exaggerate the bad distorts our understanding of the world. We live in a world where more people die of diabetes than in violent conflicts. If you don't challenge your assumptions, you'll always live in a world that feels unfamiliar. A fact-based worldview is not only more accurate, it's more empowering. Our worldview has a huge impact on the way we approach challenges. So, let's make sure it's correct. You need to see the whole story of human progress, not just a snapshot of the latest crisis. When you only see the worst in the world, you miss the amazing progress that has been made. To understand the world, you need to zoom out and look at trends, not just events. We are ignorant not because the world is so complex, but because we haven't been taught how to understand it. The world has changed much faster than our way of thinking about it. Fear of the unknown has always been humanity's biggest hurdle to progress. If we don't get the big picture right, we risk solving the wrong problems. There is much more hope and possibility in the world than most people realize. The world is constantly changing, so our understanding must keep evolving. A curious mind and a willingness to see things differently is the key to understanding. The challenge is not to make people agree, but to make them think critically. The best way to understand the world is to avoid easy answers and embrace complexity. Progress happens when we learn from data and apply it to create solutions. Real knowledge is to understand the extent of one's ignorance. When we only hear one side of the story, we miss the opportunity for true understanding. It's essential to keep learning because the world changes fast, and so must our thinking. Good intentions are not enough. To make a real difference, we need good data. People don't want to be constantly scared. They want to understand. I'm not here to tell you everything is fine. I'm here to tell you that things are complicated and often better than you think. Understanding global health is essential because it affects every part of society. Data is a tool, but it's how we use it that shapes our world. Seeing things as they are, rather than as we assume, leads to a fairer view of humanity, double quotes.